Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. Today, I got to dissect some cultural chaos, all through the lens of truth and logic, and probably just a little bit of righteous sass. And the reason why I need to do this is because today we're going to be talking about a growing trend that was brought to my attention from an interview that I did last week called Equitable Grading Practices.
In classrooms across the country, a shift. Homework is history, as is the 100-point scale.
The goal, replacing traditional grading with a practice called equitable grading.
It can be executed differently, but aims to measure how well students understand material without penalties for missing or late work.
Joe Feldman, author of the book Grading for Equity, says his organization has partnered with hundreds of schools, districts, and universities nationwide to educate them on the practice.
Proponents of the approach say it helps eliminate bias and benefits students who may need support. But critics argue students can take advantage of the system.
Reporter Heather Graff has an in-depth look at both sides of the debate, starting with one school that's piloting the practice.
Good. So that's our last question in that section.
In this Stamford, Connecticut biology class, Sean Otterspoor is teaching his students about animals.
They walk 1,000 miles.
But they won't be getting homework today or any day.
We do most of the work in class together in groups, sometimes individually and then collaborating after the fact.
It's part of West Hill High School's effort to incorporate a practice called equitable grading.
This goal of being more equitable is trying to find grading that is repeatable, bias resistant, and accurate to what the students know.
Why is that important?
Because grades are the symbols that we use to communicate with the students. So when we put that A or a B on a paper, we're trying to tell the student that they have reached a certain level of content knowledge, that they've reached a certain level of understanding. And what we have begun to realize, particularly after COVID, was that these symbols that we use with the students don't always communicate the full breadth of the knowledge of the students' understanding.
Otterspoor is part of the school's grading committee and has been piloting the practice for the district since 2021. While equitable grading can be implemented in different ways, A's and F's are generally still awarded. But the grading scale often starts at 50%, meaning that's the lowest score that can be earned. In many cases, students are not penalized for missing work and get multiple opportunities to complete tests and assignments. Exams and essays make up the majority of the final grade.
In moving to more standards-based grading or mastery-based grading, what we're hoping to do is better represent what the student knows about the subject.
Otterspoor says about 70% of teachers at his school have implemented equitable grading in some form.
We've managed to get the better part of 160 teachers to examine their grading practices and try something new.
18-year-old Jocelyn Morales Castellanos says it's taken off some pressure and allows her to focus more on enjoying classwork and studies.
If we have something wrong, he gave us the opportunity to make it again and try it again.
As for West Hill principal Michael Rinaldi, he says he was turned on to equitable grading after learning about a book called Grading for Equity.
I think it's fair. I think it's kind. I think it's important.
The publication was written by former educator Joe Feldman and contains a popular iteration of the practice. Feldman says schools that try it are seeing results.
What they found consistently is that the D and F rate that students get decreases, and that the rigor increases.
Feldman says he started his research about a decade ago because he saw a need.
Equitable grading levels the playing field because it doesn't disproportionately reward students for having resources and supports, and doesn't disproportionately punish students for not having those resources and supports. Ultimately, every student is responsible to learn the material regardless of their circumstances. It's just we don't want those circumstances to inflate or deflate grades.
In Feldman's 2018 report in favor of the practice, he writes that nearly 2/3 of teachers surveyed believed their changes to grading significantly improved student learning. But not all educators are on board, and some say it can lead to grade inflation.
It's just the framed article of my letter to the editor.
Suzanne Damali is a mom and former public school teacher in the Baltimore area.
What are your thoughts on the practice of equitable grading?
I think that there may be very good intent behind the policy, But I think the actual practice has more negative consequences that outweigh that positive intent.
She says the district where she once worked adopted a no-zero policy in 2016, which is still encouraged today.
If the student didn't turn in work, that zero was replaced by an automatic 50%. So not only, for a student who wasn't doing work, they earned a grade that really they hadn't earned.
So as opinions on equitable grading differ, National Education Association President Becky Pringle says there's value in thoughtful conversation around the issue.
We are looking at how we can build equitable systems so that the inequities that have been built on race, that have been built on poverty, that have been built on ability, that we are always looking at ways that we can close those gaps.
But to her, it extends far beyond grading.
When we think about inequities in systems, we can't only think about grading. We can't only think about assessments. We can't only think about even mental health supports. We have to think about all of it together.
How is it helpful?
Back at West Hill High School, Ottersworth says he will continue to explore the benefits of an updated grading practice.
Do you think that equitable grading is the future?
I think an examination of grading is the future, and that looking at grades that represent student knowledge has always been the goal.
Because he believes children have a right to the best education possible.
And just because tradition exists to do grading a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that's the best. That's how we push education forward, by trying new things and listening to feedback.
As the conversation continues around equitable grading, research is also being done on traditional grading systems. A 2022 study in the American Journal of Pharmaceutical Education states grading practices should be revised because grades may not always accurately measure learning. They can have adverse effects on student motivation, and they are not a good form of feedback.
Now, if that sounds like a handful of academic mumbo jumbo, that's because it is. But don't worry, I'm going to break it all down like I always do. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, when you hear what these equitable grading practices actually are and how it affects our children, you are going to precisely understand why I believe that this type of policy implementation is oppression and victimhood cloaked in false virtue. So first, let's go ahead and define what the heck is equitable grading. What exactly is it? What is it? Well, equitable grading practices, it's this shift in the way that students are graded. It's not based purely on how well they perform, but it's based on whether the system, believes that their background or their circumstances make it unfair to expect them to perform at the same level. So for example, as you guys know, I was born and raised in the Bronx, a single mom, no dad. We didn't have a whole lot of money. And according to these equitable grading practices, because of my circumstances, my mom having to work a 9-to-5 and then active in church ministry and just busy, if I can't do well in school, it's because of these circumstances. So I should not be required to try. So for example, if equitable grading practices were employed when I was in school, I would have been allowed to turn in work late with no penalties, right? I could get a minimum grade of like 50, even if I did absolutely nothing, like no work. I'd be given the opportunity to retake a test as many times as I wanted to. And I could even be graded only on the things that I get right, not what I failed to grasp. And I'd be allowed to skip participation. Who needs to raise your hand? Who needs to be engaged? I could skip participation and still pass. And so let me be clear. This is not about giving struggling students support. I am all for tutoring. Mentorship is incredibly important, and we should be helping kids who need it. But that is not what these equitable grading practices are. This is a complete overhaul of academic standards based not on truth, not on merit, but on feelings and identity politics and assumed inequity. And I am guaranteeing you, this is going to lead our children into failure, to keep them at the bottom, which is what Democrats want. So let's examine the real problems with this equitable grading practice. I want to go ahead and unpack it. So number one, it undermines responsibility. So when you remove deadlines and eliminate penalties and just give out these little pity grades, that's not helping children. What that does is it conditions them for failure. So in the real world, if you don't show up, you don't get paid. So if you have a job, any of the ones listening out here, you have a job, try telling your boss, hey, I need to redo that report that was due, the one that I didn't turn in last week. What's going to happen is we're going to end up turning out a generation that they will not be able to be adults. That's how you raise a generation of adults who expect rewards without results. We're already seeing the outworking of that in the young millennials and the Gen Zers. This is how they view and see the world. They believe that mediocrity should be rewarded. And now employers are finding that it is very difficult to attract and retain top talent because everyone wants a participation trophy. Rewarding mediocrity is what leads to this. So for example, with equitable trading practices, if every student gets a 50 just for existing, what message does that send to the kids like me who were actually putting in the work? Why study? Why work hard? Why go the extra mile when Taquayshawn in the back row gets half the credit for just sleeping through the semester or not showing up at all? Effectively, we are punishing excellence to avoid offending failure. That, my friend, that is injustice. That is not equity. That helps no one, and it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. These equitable grading practices, first of all, they assume that minority students or students from low-income homes can't possibly be expected to perform at the same level as their peers. I was a latchkey kid. I was walking to school by myself at the age of 7. And the responsibility was you go to school, you pay attention, you get your homework, you come straight home. Maybe we were allowed to stop at the truck and get a snack, but you come home, you do your homework, you take the chicken out the freezer because when mama gets home, that chicken better be thawed out because she's got to get dinner on the table. You do your chores. And then maybe if there's time left, you might be able to go outside, provided you are home before the street lights come on. This is single mom, not a lot of money, minimal supervision. Did that mean that I under this equitable grading practice, I would have been allowed to just not perform, not try, not do anything other than just exist, feel sorry for myself, and have a pity party? Y'all, this is academic affirmative action with a guilt complex. It's actually disgusting. We should be raising the bar and helping students rise to meet it, not lowering the bar and then calling it justice. That helps no one. It's by the grace of God that I managed to score high enough to get accepted into a boarding school at the age of 15. And then even once I got there, because of poor academic standards in the previous school where I came from, I had to compete based on my merit. No one cared that I was Black. They were like, okay, you're behind. We got to catch you up. This type of program or practice or initiative or whatever you want to call it, it destroys meaningful achievement. How? When grades no longer reflect your knowledge or your ability, it becomes meaningless. So that means employers and colleges, they can't trust transcripts. The transcript means nothing. Parents, we can't measure progress, and then students can't develop an accurate sense of where they stand because we're replacing objective truth with some subjective sympathy. And trust me, that never ends well. These children are being set up for real world shock. This is why Starbucks can't retain good employees. Starbucks tells them, listen, you got to wear a uniform and it needs to be this, this, and this. They get 3 choices. And you actually have employees saying, my personal freedom and identity is being stripped. I'm sorry. You work for me. I dictate the rules of engagement here. And in exchange for that, you earn a wage. These children, who are now, many of them are being turned out into the world as adults, they are setting up. They are going to be shocked when they get into the real world, because life doesn't come with do-overs and bonus points for effort. If students are coddled through school with no real consequences, how are they going to cope when the real world slaps them with deadlines and expectations and schedules and rejection? They're going to melt down. They're not going to be able to handle it. We're not preparing children for life. We're patting them from it. And this is why so many young adults out in the world today cannot function on their own, because we lied to them. But here's what I want to do now. I want to analyze the dangerous philosophy behind these equitable grading practices. Let's be honest. This isn't just bad policy. It's actually rooted in a very dangerous worldview. And that worldview is one that sees people as permanent victims, just systems as permanently oppressive. Truth is now relative. It's not objective. So instead of teaching resilience and personal agency and accountability, equitable grading teaches that, if you fail someone, it's someone else's fault. If you fail, it's someone else's fault. It's not your fault. If the expectations are just too high, we have to lower them, because you cannot be expected to rise to the occasion. And that if some succeed, the reason why those succeed, it must be unfair. Do y'all know what this is? This is Marxist ideology with a report card. Don't fall for it. This is equity over excellence, compassion over competence, emotionalism over actual education. This is Marxism rearing its ugly head, and sadly, many Black educators are actually falling for it. So listen, equity doesn't mean that we give everyone the same outcome. It means everyone gets the same opportunity. But when opportunity is replaced with entitlement, that's not the recipe for justice. You get chaos. Parents, if you are a parent watching this, you need to be paying attention. Ask your school board if they are adopting these practices. Many school districts and municipalities, they've already adopted this. You need to be at the PTA meeting. See, this is why I homeschool, because I'm not playing that. But you need to ask your child's teacher, how is grading handled? Because if you don't speak up, they're going to sneak this in under the radar, and your child is going to be the one who pays for it. We should be raising strong kids, not fragile ones who need helmets to do the basics. We need to demand fairness with the standards and compassion with truth, and then help without the handouts. So that's my take. I wanted to bring this to you guys in case you were unaware what equitable grading practices were. And I'm curious to know what you think in the comments below. If you're an educator and you're like, I've kind of seen this play out and there is some positive benefit to it, I want to hear it. But if you're like, you know what, I'm really tired of these Marxists weaseling their way into the educational system and trying to destroy everything, and we need to push back against this, I want to hear from you too. But if you enjoyed this episode, share it with another parent, share it with an educator, share it with anyone who is tired of watching the bar get lowered, all in the name of this fake fairness. And don't forget to check out more of my content here on the channel. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. And until next time, you guys, don't flinch when the culture shakes. We stand firm, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.